In a world where you need a podcast that is equally as cool and cunning with punchlines and one-liners, one man decides to take it up a notch. Ladies and gentlemen, give it up for Mark Flores.
Thank you guys. Welcome to Paper Review. I am your host, Mark Flores. By the way, today's episode is brought to you by Game Swappers. Game Swappers, buy, sell, trade. Keep in mind you can follow Game Swappers on Instagram, at Game Swappers. That's at GAMESWAPPERS. Game Swappers, buy, sell, and trade. Okay, so there's not really much to cover on this SmackDown recap that I was going to have. But what I ended up finding out was some new information that's going to lead up to WrestleMania. And what I ended up finding out was that Shane McMahon is training very hard to this match leading up to WrestleMania. Maybe this is a disguise being put up by WWE so that maybe we think he's actually going to wrestle, or maybe he is actually going to wrestle. Either way, one of two scenarios that's going to come out of WrestleMania. It's either going to be Shane McMahon is going to wrestle The Undertaker in a Hell in a Cell, or Shane McMahon's going to find someone to represent him to fight Undertaker at the Hell in the Cell. Either which way, I'm happy with either option. Like I said, the roster for WWE is dwindling. It's everyone's pretty much all the main tier stars are injured, sadly. So we have to find some alternatives, and this alternative is good either way. I'm happy with it either way. So there was nothing really developing on SmackDown. It was more of a stagnant episode just because there was no key storylines. Kevin Owens ended up beating the Big Show tonight. The New Day ended up wrestling against Y2AJ or AJ Y2J or whatever they want to be called, and Mark Henry. They ended up losing that match. I think the New Day ended up losing. Either which way, it really didn't matter, just because at the end of the day, this is just nothing that's going to be pushing the storyline here. What I really wanted to get to is, since today is Ric Flair's birthday, happy 67th birthday, Nate. I wanted to recap on the life and times of Ric Flair. The only thing is that this guy is 67 years old. The 30 minutes is not going to do the man justice. What I'll do is I'll just keep it short and sweet, and I'll honestly tell you for the last, I'll honestly keep a good segment going for the last 10 minutes just to show how much I appreciate the guy. Richard Morgan Flair, also known as Ric Flair, was born in Charlotte, North Carolina, and he is currently under a WWE Legends contract. He has you're looking at a 40-year career spanning everywhere. We're talking AWA, NWA, WCW, WWF, TNA, Ring of Honor, New Japan Pro Wrestling. This guy has been everywhere. He, to my knowledge, is the only person to work more than everyone else in every major promotion. What I mean by that is that there's no current active superstar that has wrestled in the AWA, NWA, WCW, WWF, TNA, Ring of Honor, and New Japan ever. Ric Flair is the only person to do that. You need to commend the guy when you talk about longevity and how his name has transcended 40 years. No other person has done it. Sadly, like I said, some players in the game haven't lasted that long. Sorry, Arn Anderson, but that's what happens. He's a 6-time WCW World Champ, 2-time WWF Champ. Some quick factoids is that he survived a plane crash in 1975. So he ended up in a plane crash and ended up surviving with a bad back. He ended up breaking his back, and he ended up doing physical therapy. And with an 8-month rehab involved in that physical therapy, he was able to resume his wrestling career. Now talk about an Iron Man. This guy has lasted, especially getting one of the key things is that when you get injured early in your 20s, it is not as bad as getting injured in your 40s or your 50s. Luckily, his young body was able to recover at that time, so props to him for surviving. That is just, I would not know what to do in that situation, but maybe that's why he's just limousine riding now, and he probably sticks to jets instead of planes. So he ends up doing AWA, NWA, and what ends up happening is that the NWA heavyweight title ends up going to WCW when WCW inherits NWA. And in the spring of '91, he ended up being demoted as the booker. Ric Flair was the booker in '91, and the owner of not the owner of WCW, but one of the men running the show, Jim Herd, he ended up wanting to give Flair a pay cut, and Flair wasn't having it just because at that point in '91 he was still a major draw. You're talking, this guy was still a top heel. He was still, there's still echoes of the Horsemen from the previous organizations he was in and the current organization he was in WCW. So he says, forget that. And at that point, he was fired from WCW, and then ended up going a couple months later in August to WWF. And he ends up doing a couple stints. He ends up doing a couple months into the WWF, and then lo and behold, he ends up winning the Royal Rumble in 1992. Enters at number 3. This match lasts longer than 60 minutes. Longer, about 60 minutes, and then he eliminates Psycho Sid. He ends up winning the WWF Championship. He ends up losing it to Macho Man Randy Savage, where they end up getting in a feud where Ric Flair proposed that he was seeing Macho Man's then girlfriend at the time, but the angle is that Flair had photos of her and Macho Man. That Flair had photos of her and Elizabeth, but those photos ended up being fake. But with that type of build-up, is that Flair is the perfect person to build that kind of angle where he's the one being promiscuous with someone else's lady. I mean, Flair's the only one that could cut a promo like that because he's so skilled, and he's been doing the same gimmick in previous organizations for 25 years before that. So that's something you got to look at as far as a good promo, and he's very good at what he did at that point. So then Macho Man ends up losing the title to the Ultimate Warrior. And then what ends up happening is that Bret Hart inherits the title, and then Bret Hart ends up getting beat by Flair for Flair to be the second for him to win the second title that he has. It was a very short-lived reign. So he ends up shooting back to WCW from 93 to 96. And then the year of 97, he goes on a hiatus. And then from 98 to 01, he ends up coming back. The Four Horsemen stable would always change between players because Arn Anderson would end up leaving. So then it would end up being Benoit, Malenko. That other man. I forget his name. He was a football player for the Chicago Bears. Oh, man. Well, anyway, I'm not going to have dead air and worry over that. It will come back to me in the later segment. But so he ends up doing WCW until WCW gets inherited by WWF during the whole alliance scandal. Oh, Mongo McMichael is the guy's name. Sorry about that. I didn't mean to. I wouldn't sacrifice dead air for me trying to remember a guy's name, but that guy was Steve Mongo McMichael. Played for the Chicago Bears. So after he goes to WWE from 01 to 05, what ends up happening is that he takes a brief stint off, and he ends up going to Ring of Honor to do a Ric Flair tour, and does another stint in does one stint in TNA, where everyone thought he was going to end his career over at TNA. But what ends up happening is that he has always stated that he wanted to end his career in WWE, and as of right now, with being the manager of Charlotte, I think he's going to end up doing that. He he's only at the manager state right now, so that's just something to note from him. So then he ends up having two stables. He ends up resurrecting the Four Horsemen as a new name called the Fortune. He ends up doing that. He has a match with Jay Lethal, which I thought which was pretty good. I saw it. It was a lot of old school Flair tricks, just because at that time in Flair's career, which is about 2011, he doesn't really have much in the tank. His last match with WWE ended up being in 08 with Shawn Michaels, and just rightfully so. He had to have ended it there. I mean, when you start thinking about it, I mean, can your body live up to big time matches? Can your name? I know the name Ric Flair can live on, but the fact of the matter is that the name can only take you so far. Your name brings you up. Your name sells you those arenas. Your name sells out the programs, but your body is the thing that's going to sell the show out and have people saying, wow, Ric Flair can still put on a good show. I'm definitely going to see him again next time he comes out. Or it could be the difference between that or, yeah, you filled in all the seats, you did all that, but wow, people were looking at your match and were just saying, wow, what a terrible match. I'm never coming back to see Ric Flair again. So what I wanted to get at is this. I'm going to say something that I've always told people, but I want to bring it to light on this podcast because I like being real firm on my beliefs here, but I'm always in room, I'm always around for a good, healthy debate. So it's like this. If Ric Flair was in his mid-20s at this point and signed with WWE with that talent that he brought in, the same talent that he brought in with the previous, when he started in the AWA, we would be looking at the biggest star of all time. And that is not cutting truth out. That is just the straight up truth. He would probably be double, if not triple, the charisma of The Rock, triple the charisma of Hulk Hogan, your Steve Austins, anyone that's over at this point. I mean, he would be the man. And that's no exaggeration. You look at his previous stuff, all his NWA promos are around when he was in his mid-30s. You're thinking that was 1986. He was born in 49, so 59, 69, 79, 89. So if he cut a promo at 89, he's 40 years old. That's a 40-year-old man running game like he's a 25-year-old jet-flying son of a gun. This guy had it all. You know, there's no exaggeration to assume that this guy cutting promos like that in his 40s, cutting better promos even when he was younger. I mean, this guy made you believe that he was a millionaire. The Four Horsemen gimmick was no gimmick because they lived that lifestyle. So imagine Ric Flair in his younger days just cutting promos like that now. I mean, you have no reason to believe that this guy's just going to be a megastar. I mean, in the days of social media, I mean, this guy would be revered. I mean, he was a lot easier on the eyes back in the day. I mean, that's no stretch of the imagination, but think about how his charisma, you're talking about like 4 times the charisma of Shawn Michaels. You're talking the moveset would be lack thereof, just because you're dealing with a guy who was more of a mat wrestler than a high flyer. Ric Flair rarely went to the top turnbuckle, even in his heyday. Maybe for the occasional superplex, but later in his career he wasn't able to do much. He could sell a match perfect, but we're talking like there's no power moves being delivered from Flair. But what I wanted to get at, to my point being, is in this era of social media where everything's being recognized, where everything is just so instant, where I could share a video to someone across the street and then that guy's going to share it to everyone on Facebook. Ric Flair's promos would be everywhere. This guy would be chasing tail like wildfire out in this era. I mean, you're lucky that this guy was cutting promos back in the 80s, because if it was right now, I don't even know if we'd be talking about Stone Cold. I don't even know if we're going to be talking about The Rock or even talking about Shawn Michaels. Because if it's a bunch of ifs and whens, but you have to respect the guy for what he brought to the game. He gave you an established, if you want to know how to cut a promo, you look at Ric Flair tapes. If you want to know how to build up a storyline, you look at Ric Flair tapes. This guy is the blueprint to being a successful, charismatic star. For moves, you look somewhere else. That's just a given. It just depends what your style is. Maybe you are a mat wrestler, so yeah, definitely look at earlier Ric Flair tapes. But, for ring psychology, charisma, promos, all that, I mean, you're going to look at him. He knows he got the 101. And what I said earlier in my 2 episodes ago is I know for a fact that Charlotte cuts good promos now because look who her teacher is. It's the main man. It's the man who you should be learning to cut promos. I'm not surprised if he doesn't have this, if he doesn't have an organization out there where he has a little ring and teaches people out there, because that's instant money. He could be 67 years old right now. Oh, he's 67 years old right now, but you could still probably go to him and get advice from him on how to cut these promos because he has so much knowledge. We're almost talking 50 years of wrestling experience. Who else do you know can bring that to the table? This guy has been around the world, literally. He's wrestled on almost every continent. I'd be damned to assume that's correct, because this guy's longevity it's going to be surpassing everyone. There's going to be no one now that's going to have a career as Ric Flair's has. I mean, there's no older wrestlers that do this anymore. It's a benefit, it's a blessing and a curse, because now we look at the fact that Ric Flair in his later careers, we're talking his 50s and his 60s, he didn't take as many bumps as he did as when he was younger. But, so my point being is that the average lifespan of a wrestler nowadays isn't going to be, you're talking your average Ric Flairs where you start at 18 and go all the way to 60. That's not going to happen anymore. In this world of vanity and people not trying to work hard for all this, it's going to end up happening where you start in the indies, work your way up to the mid-20s, come work for WWE for about a decade, maybe 2, and then you don't end up wrestling longer than that. There's only two wrestlers older than 50 years old that can still sell out a show. Or actually, you know what? I'm not even going to say sell out a show because they can't even do that anymore. That there's going to be 2 wrestlers that actually put butts in seats. Ric Flair, Hulk Hogan. Yeah, and then they count the Undertaker, but I'm talking like veterans. We're talking the upper tier. You're talking the Undertaker age. We're talking Hulk Hogan and Ric Flair status, because as of right now, we're looking at an age where wrestlers are dying young. The average age of a wrestler ending his career, I mean, Rick Rude died at 40, 41. You're looking at different guys dying so young. I mean, Eddie Guerrero in his mid-30s, Test, mid-30s. There's a lot of people young and gone doing that. It's sad to see, but I want to wrap this up by saying it was an honor and a great privilege of mine to see Ric Flair in the ring a couple weeks ago in the Citizens Bank Arena in Ontario when I saw a SmackDown taping. It was just good to it was just good to see him in the flesh, because you're looking at this guy who's just done it all. He's been around the world. Imagine all the stories imagine catching him at a bar and having all these stories he could tell. He could probably be in there for hours doing that. One thing I really do want to say is that this guy, if he was in his prime today, you wouldn't be talking about any other wrestlers. You'd be talking about Ric Flair. And that's just the damn truth. It's not even a play on the imagination. All wrestling fans, all the marks alike will agree that this guy would have been the man. I mean, if I was to put John Cena's mic work against Flair's, he equates to about a quarter of that. It's that apparent that this guy can do it. It's kind of sad to see how Flair is now. I mean, he kind of downplays his whole gimmick to a bunch of woos now, but if he had it like he did back in the day, it would be a different ball game. But anyway, I wanted to keep it a short-lived, a shorter podcast. But I wanted to let you know that I wanted to keep you guys updated on this WrestleMania update. And since it was Ric Flair's birthday and there was nothing much to recap on SmackDown, I just jotted some quick notes on how about Ric Flair, on how impactful Ric Flair was to me, and how he impacted the business. He was, look back on, if you have the WWE Network, look back on what he did back in WCW. And look at all his matches. Just look at the in-ring psychology. You can even look at the match he did with Shawn Michaels at WrestleMania. It was a good match. Like I said, total psychology because this guy's in his later years, but nonetheless, still a good match to watch. That's all I have for tonight. But I do want to let you know that this podcast and my podcast show is brought to you by Game Swappers. Game Swappers, buy, sell, and trade. You can follow them on Instagram at Game Swappers. That's GAMESWAPPERS. Game Swappers, buy, sell, and trade. All right, guys. Well, that's all I have for tonight. I want to let you know that for me to expand this whole show, I really want to do it. I need support back. I need to know, what the fans think. As long as I get that, I'll feel more confident enough to expand the show from 30 minutes to more. But I need to know critiques. I need to know everything on what I need to do to improve. I know I still need to do improvement. I re-listen to my podcasts all the time just to get critiques myself to see if I can improve. But for you as the fans, if you guys want a better product from me, I won't hesitate to improve on what I have to do. But I need to know what you guys think. I need to know what shows you guys want to hear. And if it becomes to the point where I need to make more shows and mean to make these shows longer, then I'll have to do it. I'll be delighted to do it. I love doing these podcasts. I feel a lot more comfortable doing it. I want to have the best fans in the world. That's no stretch. The truth is that I want to, because I know I can provide a good show. I just need to know which way to steer these shows in the right direction to where it satisfies me to deliver it to the audience, and B, where it satisfies the audience and them saying, you know what, man, that was a great show. I want to see, I want to hear another one, or I want to hear him talk about such and such, or what does he think about this? Perfect. You launch those ideas to me, boom, that's another show curtailed to you and maybe the demographic that you're appealing to. Perfect. Awesome. That's what I want to do. But I need to know these things. That way it comes back to me. So just let me know. And please, if you can, like I said, if any show appeals to you specifically, please share it. Like I said, if you think other people would like to hear it, please share it. That way I can expand and know what the fans want at the end of the day. Because as long as I know and I'm in communication with that, then that means you guys will get a better show. That means I'll have more material to write. And everyone will be satisfied on both ends. Because if I'm not happy, if you're not happy with the show, then I'm not happy. And then that means room for improvement. But anyway, you guys have a good night. Be safe. And catch you guys out in the danger zone, all right? You guys have a good night.